Okay. Good evening, everybody. It's Bharat here from Saturday Night Fever Live, and it's another episode. And really exciting to have a very good friend of mine and a college friend to boot, and that's Samir Nagarajan. Samir is, besides being my college buddy, he is right now the global president of HR at Canada Pharmaceutical. He's had a really distinguished career over the last.
Here I am. Hi.
I'm not able to. Yeah.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me, Bharat?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Great.
I guess I'm going to check with audience. Can you hear Samir as well? Just give us a thumbs up or say yes. Okay, super. Thank you, Nihal. Okay, great. Hey, Samir, thanks a lot for making it here, man. I really appreciate it.
Great.
Really do.
Great to be here.
It's nice to have you on the other side of the fence with me asking you some questions and shit. You know, I know we do our once in a while we do our get-togethers, but this is really a different way to look at it, and I think we can hopefully have a really meaningful conversation as well and have some fun while we're doing it.
We shall look forward to that. And for those in the audience who don't know it as yet, Bharat and I first met in 1983 when he did BA Economics and I did a BCom. So our conversations and dialogues go back decades now.
Yeah, can you believe it, folks, that, Samir is a BCom and now he's, heading HR. And I'm a BA Economics and I had a career in IT. I mean, wow, just goes to show, right? The degree doesn't really matter. It just depends on how you manage to get around to doing it.
Yes.
So cool. Samir, you've had a kick-ass career. You've had a hell of a career. You've had a lot of global experience. I mean, you've been in different countries and stuff. Can you start off and tell us a little bit about that so that the audience gets to know?
Yeah, sure. So yes, I think it's also interesting to talk about what career choices I made and how those choices got influenced. So I did my BCom. I can still interpret balance sheets and draw P&Ls and do ratio analysis, but my heart was internet. So towards the end of my BCom in my third year, when I started having a choice in terms of what to do next, I chose to do an MBA rather than a CA. And within an MBA, I chose HR. At that time, it was I would say a little soft. It was like, it sounds interesting to work with people and what makes people tick. I remember my interview at XLRI. I got grilled quite a lot on, I said, when I look back on it, it sounds a bit crazy. I said, understanding human behavior is what I'd like to do. And I think, I got a lot of questions about that, but they also dropped a very clear hint saying that, we'll continue the conversation on campus. So I was like, okay.
Okay, so you made it through that round. That was good.
But I think the great thing about studying at XLRI is that I think one, it provoked an interest in every area of HR. So it was behavioral science, individual change management, culture, although that was still an emerging theme in MBA in organizational behavior then. So also leadership. And laws and industrial relations. It was, I think I was really interested in that. And then therefore, when I started working, before that, more than all that, the content of what was taught, I think what XLRI taught me was how to learn and how to grow. And so, the content of what I learned got outdated in 5 to 7 years later. But how to learn stays with you for a lifetime. So then I started the choice that I divided my career into 2 phases. The first phase was a lot of experimenting. Worked in factories, worked in IT for a year. As you know, I was in a computer company from 2000 to 2001, worked in consulting. And then made a choice and said, I want to be head of HR in the long term, head of HR for a manufacturing organization. So I said, okay, then you're going to be in a factory. And then it took on a couple of shades from there. And then the last, I'd say roughly from about 2003 onwards, I've been either creating the HR function or leading it through a massive change management process in different organizations. And that's what I enjoy doing.
You had a large part of your career at Unilever, right?
Yeah, a total of about 19 years across 2 stints. And I left Unilever in the first stint because I got the opportunity to set up the HR function in a building materials company. That was India Gypsum Limited. And that's when this whole process started. You know, either set up a function or take it through a big change management process. So I did that, and that's where I am, and that's my passion, if you like. That's what really excites me, and so I consciously choose roles of that sort. I think the stress level is a little higher than normal, you know, as it always is when you're creating something, as opposed to maintaining it or managing it. But it has its own degree of satisfaction that is terrific.
Yeah, we'll talk about stress. We will get to that.
We shall. But that's really about the choices. You know, there's something about passion, something about openness, experimenting a lot, not being afraid to fail. I mean, I don't like failing, but well, sometimes you do fail, and fail fast, get up and move on. And then taking it on from there, and then finding what you like. I think I'm very fond of saying this. I think this whole phrase of chase your passion is abused. I don't think, for a major portion of my working life, I didn't know what my passion was. At least for the first 10 years, I didn't know what my passion was. Then I figured it out. I like being in factories. I like being in rural and semi-urban India. I like engaging with people. I like different experiences, you know, whether be it different countries or different people or different technologies and so on. So it started evolving over a period of time. And I think I'm now at a stage where I can say I know really what excites me and what doesn't, and so on.
You know, that's a great segue into what I really wanted to ask you also, is that, you know, this whole phrase of, you know, chase your passion, follow your passion. I don't know, sometimes I get the feeling that, you know, much like what you described, right? I mean, you discover your passion. It's a process of discovery. I don't know of too many people, at least, who are kind of born with that passion, or they have that passion and they know what it is. I think you're right. I mean, my sense is that, you know, in the process of experimentation, in the process of discovery, you actually discover your passion. And then once you discover it, then you can make the choice as to what you want to do with it, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely, because I think you can't know what your passion is. I mean, I have 2 or 3 ways of looking at it. I mean, I think our education system is so unidimensional and unifocused that it's difficult to identify anything that you're passionate about while you're in school, in the, you know, just after school and so on. I think fortunately there are a lot more options available now today, Bharat, when you complete your basic education, let's say your first 12 years of schooling. I mean, I'll speak for myself. Engineering, medicine, BCom, BSc, BA, probably in that city order as well.
Yeah, we guys doing BA economics were like considered the, you know, the worst of the guys. The guys who couldn't get admission anywhere else wound up taking BA economics or BA literature or something like that.
I was just thinking about BA. Well, the kids have a lot more options now, and I think I don't know. You said you don't know too many. I don't know any who, you know, at the age of 16 or 17 say this is what I'm going to do for a lifetime or something like that. So I think the key is consciously to alter the message to say, try out different things, do what you think you like, figure it out for yourself. I mean, I had a moment when I realized that and starting from my BCom and also in a later stage in my career, that what you're good at may not be what you're passionate about. Very true. That's an interesting thing to look at. You might actually struggle with something but feel very strongly about it.
Very true.
And, you know, while you're gaining mastery skills.
I spent 35 years of my career in the IT world, you know, not being passionate about it. I did it because it excited me.
Right.
You know, it was like, oh, great, I got this kick out of doing this and I got this kick out of doing that, you know, but it's a kick. It's not one where you say that, okay, oh man, this is so great, I want to follow my passion and this is all I want to do.
True.
I think my passion was leadership, you know, and I think it would have been, oops, I think we lost Samir. Hey, Samir, you're going to have to go back live again, buddy. Excuse me, audience, I'm going to have to call a friend. So just hang tight. Yeah, just get back on. Okay? So, no worries. Okay. Yeah, so audience, I mean, just think about this. This is a very, I think it's an important conversation for anybody who is trying to figure out your passion. Take the time to experiment and try out a bunch of different things. Great to have you back again.
Sorry about that.
You know,
wrong with the technology.
Technology, you can love it or you can hate it. You know, that's about it. It's a bipolar state. It's either there or not there. So cool. Let's get back to your career. So you did stints in obviously in India, but then you went to Europe for a while, right?
Yeah, so around 2011, I moved to Switzerland and I did a global role with Unilever, which was, global supply chain. So I spent 3 years in Switzerland. Then I moved to 2 years in Sri Lanka as HR director for the company there. Then I moved to another company in Dubai where I was HR director for their international business, which was basically Pakistan to US and let's say Scandinavia to South Africa, and a trading business in the Far East.
That's pretty much the globe, buddy.
Yeah.
And all this is...
And I did most of my eastward travel in my stint with India Gypsum Limited, and some of it with Unilever as well, no doubt. So towards Thailand. So the regional BPB's international headquarters was in Thailand. So we used to go very often to Thailand and then set up a business in Malaysia and travel to China and so on.
So one of the things I've always wanted to know from you, I mean, I've traveled quite a bit, but I don't think I've traveled quite as much as you have. The question I've got for you, and especially being in HR, you've been in manufacturing, supply chain, those kinds of areas. What do you find different about these? What are different in terms of the way people approach work in these cultures?
Very pronounced. I think when you want to, the hard technicality of the work doesn't change. Managers demand planning is demand planning, regardless of where you do. But if you look at attitudes towards time, attitudes towards performance, locus of control, who determines what happens? Is it me or is it fate? Or is it balance between the two? Each of these throws up very surprising and very different answers. And the generalizations don't work. I think it's very interesting. The Germans,
give us some examples?
The Germans, the Dutch, the Scandinavians are very, very finicky about times. Yeah? So, I mean, if a meeting starts at 9 a.m. and closes at 9:25 a.m., it starts at 9 and closes at 9:25. Now, if you're 2 minutes late, you're late. I mean, nobody will hold any animosity towards you, but you're late. I mean, the meeting started at 9. You joined 2 minutes late, you figure out how you're going to catch up. Conversely, in my early days in Europe, I had this experience. The meeting closes. I mean, people literally jab the leave button. That's it. So if you haven't completed what's on the agenda, too bad. You asked for a half an hour meeting. You got a half an hour meeting. People have gone on to the next item on their agenda, on their calendars now. So you want to talk again, you call a meeting again. Nahi hua to nahi hua. Now, the common generalization when I was, a student was that as you go eastward, attitudes towards time are more relaxed. But that's not true. You go to Japan. Japan is even more finicky than these.
Even more finicky. Yeah, I go to Japan. Oh, boy.
Yeah, so Japan, I think once the railway system apologized because the train was 45 seconds late or something like that. They did a public apology. Or 60 seconds late or something like that. And that's just the other is, for example, on performance. The closely held US model of a normal distribution. 5% of my people must be terrible, 5% must be exceptional, 50% must be average, blah, blah, and blah. Even in companies, and I'm not going to name them, but even in global companies where you would, there's a certain expectation that you will comply with this norm. And I once had a chance to talk to someone in Japan, a Japanese lady, and I said, how do you do it? And she looks at me and says, with great difficulty.
That was one of the points I wanted to bring up. Talking about that, I mean, performance management, one of the things that I've realized about performance management over the years is that one is, I think, and I'm going to make a provocative statement here, I think the normal distribution curve is dead. The bell curve is dead. Though I know a lot of people are so hung up with it in the sense of the fact that they don't have another system, so to speak, so everybody still follows the bell curve. But as a performance management system and as a performance tool, it's pretty backward. it doesn't factor into, it doesn't take into account a whole bunch of factors like, individual expertise, individual competencies and capabilities, stuff like that, that can actually add value. So do you think that, organizations are going to start to look at different ways in which we do performance management, or is it still going to continue doing the same thing, or are there alternatives?
I think it's more a case in my mind of yes, but what you said, it's outdated. It doesn't serve some needs. It doesn't serve individual needs. You're absolutely right. Well, I'm reminded of one of the ex-chairman of Hindustan Lever, Gopalakrishnan, who once in a presentation said, "Give me the simplicity on that side of complexity rather than the simplicity on this side of complexity."
Okay.
Now, the thing is that if you have actually mastered the normal distribution, one of the big things that the performance of the classical appraisal system forces you to do is to talk about strengths and weaknesses. It forces you to give feedback, or to use the politically correct language of nowadays, strengths and development areas. I think that's what we
development areas. That's right.
Improvement. All right.
Yeah. Areas.
But it forces that conversation. And if you look at those companies that have done away with the classical performance management system now, they're actually replacing it with more frequent feedback. Whether it's project-based feedback, whether it's monthly, whether it's weekly, whether it's going.
Yeah, you're right. There is no system as neatly as this has been made to work, right? I mean, up to now, there has been a system where you knew that, okay, the way the curve is distributed would essentially, by and large, fit your organization. The challenge is the following, right? I mean, the qualitative elements, see, the quantitative elements are very easily assessed.
Yeah.
If you've got a good system of goals and objectives and metrics to measure success, then it's, the quantitative side is pretty much taken care of. The challenge comes when, to your point, where it's the qualitative type of feedback. What are the areas you're good at? How can you get that bigger? How do you get more people? What are the areas of your development? What do you need to work on? What help do you need from us to help you work on that? And I think what winds up happening is that, unfortunately, performance management is clued in and tied up very tightly to your compensation. Now, the moment we do that, then everything falls apart.
Yeah.
Right.
And that is an issue. That is a serious issue, because I think what people miss out on is the fact that when this concept originated, or when it reached its art form peak with GE under Jack Welch.
Yeah, no, tell me about it.
Yeah, no, Jack, because everyone aspired to be like GE, it became like GE's leadership work at Crotonville and GE's performance management work and GE's succession planning work became models. But I think what people forgot in the process was that the US has a salary and reward system that is very different from the rest of the world. You're paid for the job you do.
That's right.
If you look at a place like India and a few other countries in the world, it's not only Indian, but it's very marked in India. Salary is a function of your age, experience, appraisal rating, value of the job, relative desirability to be hung on to, as let's say what your potential appraisals or your succession plans show. So it gets queered very badly. The pitch gets queered very badly by what an appraisal rating. The stakes are too high. In my opinion, the stakes become very, very high, especially in those organizations that practice the process to the hilt. And that's where the difficulty arises. I don't think there is anything such as a perfect appraisal. I mean, your sales could be great because the monsoon came on time, and your sales could be bad because there was a war somewhere on the planet. No, you can't entirely discount your own effort. But unfortunately, what often happens is that you give the individual credit for all successes,
but you don't.
And on the failures you end up saying that it's not entirely his responsibility from the individual.
So help me with this, right? I mean, how do organizations choose to grow people in your experience? Because one is obviously competency and capability and all the rest of that. But what do you look for when you're saying, okay, I want to grow this person within the organization? What are some of the things that managers, leaders, even employees need to look out for, that says that, okay, I can be successful in this career, in this role for whatever?
I think as leaders, one of the tasks that we have to do is to constantly keep Evaluating people. Now, let me explain that word a bit. So evaluating carries a very judgmental tone to it, and I don't necessarily mean it as a value statement of good or bad. But I think it's important to know when you are looking at a team member or any member whom you are working with, what is this person good at and what does he need to be coached on? He or she. I mean, I'm just using he as a illustrative pronoun. Could be he, she, or they, whatever. What do they need to work on? What is it that she needs to improve on? Where is it that I can coach? And what is the input that I can give? And it's a cycle, it's a process. Now, it's not only individual. At the same time, organizationally, you are also looking at what kind of goals is this person taking on, what kind of performance flows against those goals, what kind of behavior does a person show in leading their teams, how good are they at motivating, how good are they at managing their bosses sometimes. I think that's also things that one needs to look
at. It's a pretty significant aspect, I would think. Knowing how to manage your boss.
I would think so. But then you put together this whole thing, and then you're like, you can have a hard formal process to capture it the way companies GE or Unilever or P&G do. It could be more intuitive and informal, or even intuitive and formal, I would say, because over a period.
Sorry to interrupt. No, please finish your point.
I was just saying that over a period of time, what I've found is that practicing this process, we kind of develop an instinct for saying that, okay, this person can do a job one level above us. I don't know about whether a person can do a job 2 levels above or 3 levels above. But even 1 level above is, then you're saying that, okay, there is a bet that I can take on this person. There is a gamble. I gamble as in a reasoned gamble. It's not a point, but it's a bet that you can take, and you have a reasonable chance of success, and then you can start putting that into practice. You do have a battery of formal systems supporting it, like leadership development work and on-the-job projects and exposure to top management, shadowing, coaching. This is a whole host of interventions. But that really is...
Let's switch gears a little bit, Samir. We're talking about it now from the perspective of large organizations, right? How about startups? Because, they are all starting with a clean slate. What would your advice be to them in terms of people and people process or people management? What should they be looking out for? What should they be doing?
I think there are 2 things that I would advise, or that I would be interested in talking to small businesses about. The first is all hard stuff. How much role clarity do your people have? And the second is, how much do they enjoy what they are doing? One of my former colleagues runs a very, very successful startup across Ahmedabad, Gurgaon, and Bangalore. Great turnover, and I was very impressed. I was talking to him a couple of weeks back, and he said that it's an IT-based organization. It's an app-based organization, and his turnover on the tech front is zero. And I was like, how do you do it? He said, people enjoy what they are doing. My salaries are not amongst the best in the place. We're good. He said we're good. We are above average, but we're not exactly 100%, right? But more than anything, it's a great place to work. And he doesn't mean the certification. He means that we take a lot of effort to make this an attractive place for people to be in. And the flip side, I would say, is that founders of a company, entrepreneurs, are very intense, very driven, very hardworking people. How much do you end up wittingly or unwittingly creating clones of yourself? Because that will sabotage your leadership development and growth imperative finally.
I think that's a very, very, very valid point. And that actually is symptomatic also of a lot of what we've been seeing in the news, especially on the negative side. I'm not talking about the positive side. Unfortunately, on the negative side, with all the toxicity and whether it is the companies, I don't want to name them, but the question here is that how does one, first and foremost, I've got a pet theory here that boards are not active. They need to be way more active and way more engaged in a startup, at least in terms of how things are being done. May not be what is being done, but at least how things are being done. And I think that, allowing leadership of an organization, founders, leaders of an organization to get away with certain types of behaviors just because they are high performers or just because they're able to achieve the goals or targets of the organization, I think is a serious cop out. It's a real cop out.
Yeah.
What do what's your advice to people who are in toxic workplaces? Because it cuts across boundaries, right? It's not just restricted to startups. I mean, heck, I've worked in some pretty toxic environments myself.
I have to.
And so how does somebody deal with that?
So the news on that front is neither the, I did a bit of research myself about 3 or 4 years back. I asked people to connect with me on LinkedIn and to contact me privately, those who have had experience working with toxic managers, toxic leaders.
Right. Yeah, I remember that.
And aside from that, of course, there's the literature that's available on it. And unsurprisingly, a couple of characteristics that toxic leaders share. They're very successful with the work that they do. And therefore, whether it is founding a business or whether it is managing part of the business in an existing organization, in other words, as employee or as founder, there is a track record of success. Shareholders, unfortunately, are unwilling to disturb that equation very much. Now, because the interest is finally into shareholder return, dividend plus capital appreciation is what I also want as a shareholder.
Sure.
Employees, on the other hand, are there is an in-group, there is an out-group. Typically, the toxicity is evident to people in the out-group who are unable to influence the in-group. As a result, there is an increasing level of isolation. They're not able to develop the networks required to influence and change the behavior of the leader. Now, directors is one part of the ecosystem.
Yes, it is one part. Agree. Absolutely agree.
There is certainly something there, but then to find a way to express voice to a member of the board, for most employees would be a daunting task. I mean, frankly, even for most senior managers, it would be a daunting task.
Absolutely. No doubt about it.
Ultimately, the feedback will go and people tend to be identified, and toxic leaders by nature tend to be unrestrained. So there is a good chance that it will bounce back on the individual. But that said, I think the encouraging sign that I see nowadays in the last 3, 4, 5 years is that there's an increasing emphasis on whistleblower lines, increasing emphasis on grievance resolution processes, increasing emphasis even in the appraisal process on two-way feedback, and the process being reviewed by a manager one level up.
Yes, 1/1. But the interesting one that I am really rooting for is the dual feedback. That is, it's not just a receiver feedback that, if I'm an employee and you're my boss and you're rating me or you're appraising me, I get an opportunity to also appraise, not appraise, but at least give you the feedback in terms of what worked and what didn't work for me, as it relates to me.
Oh, yeah.
And it goes on record. Just like my appraisal goes on record, my feedback about you also goes on record. Yeah. So, there's a little bit of a checks and balances that get there. Of course, no system's going to be perfect because we're dealing with human beings here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, everybody's got their own emotions, their own thoughts, their own feelings, and so on. I think let's take a pause here for a minute, Samir, and let's hit some questions that I've got. I think this is some interesting ones. Vivan wants to know, how do you build an inclusive culture when part of the team is remote? How do you make them feel involved, as often they cannot partake in offline team building activities and so on? You want to take a stab at that? I've got my thoughts, but
I think the exciting thing about these questions is that this is all work in progress. So each of us has a chance to shape the direction that it takes. And if you're motivated by the idea of featuring in research work and just say an MBA curriculum 10 years from now, well, this is your great opportunity to shape the future of work, as they say. I mean, it's not only about inclusive culture, frankly. Some of the questions that bother me are how do you induct newcomers? Because a lot of the offline induction work is actually around coffee table conversations around who influences whom and how do decisions get made around here, which you don't really have an opportunity to do when you're online. But you need to create time, you need to create the spaces for those online conversations, which would have otherwise happened offline. And that's where it's critical for a leader or for an HR person to be able to change their behavior to suit the new reality. So yes, I might have done coffee conversations for 30 years with new employees around in informal settings and semi-formal settings, but I'll just have to learn how to do it online now. And those companies and those teams that are able to take this on are the ones that are really succeeding. So one of the companies where I worked with during the peak of the lockdown, they used to have half an hour check-in times for the entire group, and it was just meant to be pour yourself a mug of beer or a soft drink or a cup of tea and just come along. It was a little at a suitable time, let's put it that way, and just come along and chat for a while. So that's one way of leveling out what the group was doing and what they were saying and working on.
So, Vivan, I also want to add something more to what Samir said, and especially in the tech space, right? In the tech world, and most of us who are here today are probably from the tech world, is that, engaging with your teams is obviously it's a no-brainer, it's critical. The question you need to ask yourself is, how often am I engaging with my team at a different level? See, I know you'll do the meetings, I know you'll do the scrum calls, I know you'll do the stand-ups and all the rest of that. But what is it that we're doing which is beyond, those work-related activities? So, for example, right, you just sit down, like Samir was saying, with the gang that you've got, and just say, okay, guys, bring your beverage of choice, and sit down and let's just talk about stuff. That's one way to engage. The other way, there are multiple ways in which you can engage. I've been talking to some of the people I work with, and they've all been trying different ways in which they can get people to connect at a different level. So, for example, one very creative one that I found was, especially people with families, right? Very often their spouses or the working couple, they're too busy on Zoom or whatever it is all day long. Now, for them to have another Zoom meeting just so that you can have another bit of an engagement seems like adding insult to injury. So this company, what they did was they said, look, yes, it's going to be on Zoom, but we want your family there. We don't want to do the call with you. We want your family there. And my family, as the boss, I'm going to bring my family to the meeting as well. And we're just going to talk about stuff. It could be, how are the kids? How's that? What's going on here? And the other thing that they did was they created chat rooms. So if a group of 3 or 4 of them wanted to go out and have a separate conversation outside of the common Zoom meeting where everybody was sitting in, they did some pretty creative, interesting stuff that way. I think, Vivan, I always say this, as a leader, you're going to have to communicate more and frequently about a variety of things. The more you communicate, I don't care if it's over communication or whatever, but communicate. And the more you can do that, the more fun it'll be, the more engaged your people are going to be. Because at the end of the day, what are we looking for? We're talking about engagement, right? So focus on engagement, don't focus on the content necessarily, is my advice. Okay, here's another one.
Right there. Yeah.
Akshay has got a question saying, how do you define a toxic work environment? As sometimes the work can just demand longer hours and require more work. Okay, do you want to shoot that?
Yeah, sure. So, Asha, good question. I think it's important to understand that toxicity at the workplace is not about the hours that you work. It is not about the content of the job. It is about things like, are you clear what is expected of you? Or do you have a leader who, tends to pick on you every time something goes wrong? He or she is quick to point out that you've done it wrong. And when things go right, the leader says, oh, I did that. Or a leader who calls you out for your failures in public. Ambiguity.
Or just straight out being abusive, disrespectful in front of everybody.
Disrespectful is the right way of putting it, yeah. And any situation where you find yourself anxious about the idea of coming to work in the morning, you're perpetually thinking, what's my boss going to say about this? Perpetually looking over your shoulder. Is there someone trying to upstage me? Is there someone trying to cut me? And it's not to do with you. It is about the place that you are in. Then you have a toxic work environment on your hands. Toxic work environments most commonly have a toxic leader whose behavior is encouraging that kind of behavior in the team at work. And that's the reality.
Yeah. So Ashay, if you're in a toxic environment, right, and you've got a place where you are being made to feel small, you are not getting the respect. You are not being given respect. You don't have a respectful work environment. You have a boss. I know I had a boss once who was openly abusive. F bomb, B bomb, BC, MC, all that was out. It was all there. And this was at the senior most level in the organization. Okay. So we're not talking about, some small time general manager or director or something. Here we're talking about real senior person. So if that is the tone at that level of the organization, can you imagine what everybody underneath was also like? Because that's the culture that gets built. You get built up to see that, oh, okay, that behavior is okay. And he was a super successful leader, by the way. And that goes back to Samir's point, right? Most toxic leaders, research has indicated, are actually super successful in terms of achievement. But they suck in terms of how to handle people and how to handle their own emotions, for example, right? So there's no maturity, there's no emotional maturity, there's none of that stuff. So my advice to you, if you're in a toxic environment, get the hell out of there. Okay?
I'll just
and if you got work that requires longer hours and so on, as long as you're happy doing it and you're okay doing it, do it.
do it.
But if you need time to take time off for yourself, you need to say, hey, you know what? I've been working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week for the last 3 months, and I'm exhausted. Now I can't do it anymore. Go back to your boss and have the conversation before this situation comes up. Have a conversation. Hopefully that boss is somebody who understands and says, yeah, you know what? Okay, man, you need to take a break. At least take a few days off. I don't know. Samir, you have anything you want to jump in with?
Just want to add one more thing to Ashay and anyone else who's listening or who's interested in this topic. A very favorite topic. By the way, I have worked with at least 2 toxic leaders in a career. Yeah. And it's scarring. So I would just say that a favorite manipulative tactic of toxic leaders is to try and explain to you why your performance is inadequate. And it's manipulation because what you need to remember is that your performance will never be 100%. You can try hard, you can do better than other people, but you will never achieve an absolute standard of 100%. And why is that important? Because especially for people who are very driven by performance, who are very achievement oriented, this is, it's now gotten a name that I've heard in the last 3 or 4 years, which is gaslighting. At the time when it happened, I didn't even know what to call it because for a while, I genuinely believed that I wasn't good enough. Yeah. But it was a question. Then it struck me, and when I reflected on it, I was like, I'm not good enough for whom? I seem to be doing everything that is stated to be expected, and so we went through that entire process of understanding what was happening and so on. So look out for gaslighting as well. Where you see gaslighting happening in a workplace, it means again that there's some toxicity in the workplace that you need to look out for.
Yeah.
Get out.
I think we can have a separate segment just for toxicity in the workplace, because this is a huge topic, folks. I can tell you, and in most places it never even gets to see the light of day. Okay, so I encourage you that when you're coming across these types of instances and so on, please bring it up, not just to yourself. Talk to people who you trust. Because believe me, it's psychologically scarring. It takes a long time to recover from that, because a lot of the blame, I had a tendency to take a lot of the blame on myself. I said, shit, I must be doing something wrong. Something is not okay with me. And that can really kill you. Okay? So hang there, and if you want to talk, you want to bring it up, please do talk to somebody. All right? Don't allow yourself to stew in this environment. It's not healthy. Okay.
One more point, Bharat.
One.
The survey that I did via LinkedIn, it was 4 or 5 years back. I told you 12 to 14 people got in touch with me. Ultimately, each of them left the job and moved to another organization.
That's right.
It was just that they did a lot more due diligence and spoke around a lot more and figured out that the boss that they were going to work for was not toxic.
Toxic, right.
But that seems to be the only solution, because one of the things that
because you can do the whistleblowing thing, but we know how whistleblowing within the organization works, right? I mean, it's very rare to find an organization that's actually going to dig into this and do something about changing that behavior.
So I see a comment from Manoj on the chat, which is he's talked about a toxic work environment, and finally, because of health issues, he left and then got better. But that's the truth.
Manoj, more power to you, and I hope you're feeling better, my friend. Okay, absolutely. You made the right choice. Absolutely made the right choice. Okay, let's switch a little gears. Audience, please keep the questions coming in. These are really good ones. Please get more in. Feel free. Now let's talk about. Let's talk a little bit about culture.
All right.
I think that's a neat segue from toxicity to cultures, right? So, what defines an organization's culture? How do you create?
It's a very interesting question. It's a great segue, and it's a very interesting question, Bharat, because there is no standard accepted definition of culture in organizations. There is a definition of a national culture, which is around, as expressed in arts and crafts and behavior and performing arts and so on. But in an organization, the simplest way of explaining it is the way things are done around here. And, that's often used as a catch-all, all-inclusive kind of term. My favorite model to explain culture is just 4 elements: how you recruit, how you reward, how you train, and how you communicate. If you analyze behavior along these 4 dimensions, you'll get a pretty good working model of what the culture of X organization is like. Because those are the 4 key points of communication in an organization: recruit, reward, train, communicate, as such. And then these are events in terms of, so when you recruit, what do you look for? What do you talk about the organization? When you train, what are the messages you're giving out? Whom are you even choosing for a training program? Who makes it your succession planning, and who makes it your leadership development intervention programs? Who do you train, and how do you train? And what's the preferred medium of communication? Is the language hostile? Is the language evasive? Do you confront issues? You can list out a whole lot of questions along each of these and see exactly how open you are, how participative you are, how collaborative you are, and it's very easy to sense when you're not. I think the other thing great about this model is that it gives you areas that you can tangibly work with.
So I've got a question related to culture, right? Most people, when we think about it, when somebody says, "Oh, I have a very open organization, open culture, I have a very transparent culture," all of those are considered to be positive words, right? Yeah. To define the culture of an organization. Sometimes you can have too much of a good thing, right?
Well, I just said no. It was like I wouldn't really want my competitors to know what the salary of my CXOs are. So to that extent, I would say openness is not desirable. But the stuff that you really need to keep confidential and quiet is actually, you can identify those and hold on to them very tightly.
Right.
But by and large, I would say the more open you are, the better it is. The thing is about strong cultures, the openness is also matched by a strong sense of boundaries. So it's unlikely, if you have a strong working culture, it's unlikely that you're going to see a lot of strength across cultures as well.
That's a very, very insightful thought, that you can be, have the openness, but you also have a clear definition of the boundaries.
Yeah.
That is known, and everybody knows that, hey, this is the operating. I remember, I'll just give you an example, right? One of my leadership styles has always been that in meetings when I have my staff meetings, or, even roundtables and so on, the discussion is meant to be, and I make it very clear to people who participate in these meetings, that, guys, everything that is said over here, you're open to say anything you want.
Yeah.
Within this room, we can discuss things threadbare. But once we make a decision, right, that decision is it.
Yes.
And once we get out of the room, I don't want to hear that, "Oh, I tried to say this and I tried to say that, and this happened and that happened, and then finally we reached this decision." Everybody needs to get behind it. So I hear your point, and I understand your point of having the boundaries also laid out pretty clearly.
Correct.
For it to be truly effective as an open organization.
Correct.
Otherwise, it becomes a free for all, right? I mean, and we're working for an organization. We're looking for, you've got revenue goals, you've got, cost goals, you've got customer goals, whatever. So I think those things are very, very important. But interesting, just like we talk about toxic leaders, leaders have a huge role to play in the culture of an organization, right?
Absolutely. They shape the culture. They influence the culture. And I was reminded listening to your last couple of comments, is a great moment for this example. I know of one organization in Bangalore that has a probation period for policies. So when they launch a policy, they implement a new policy and they seek feedback for 6 months before confirming the policy or retiring it.
That's a fantastic, man. I got to write this down.
Isn't that a good idea?
This is an awesome idea. This is an awesome idea.
Yeah. So
that's an open culture.
That's openness. You're saying, give me feedback, and if you don't like the policy, tell me that you don't like it. I'll throw it out. It's not cast in stone merely because I've signed on
it. Probation for policy implementation. That's really cool.
So this goes back to your point about both the openness of the culture as well as the impact of the leader, because this is a founder. This is a founder who's saying that, yeah, I think this is the right thing to do, but please feel free to tell me. And it's anonymous feedback. You don't have to identify yourself when you say that this policy sucks and it doesn't make any sense for me and so on. And he says we take a considered view. If it's, if it's just Samir, if it's just one person alone saying I have a problem, we'll see what we can do maybe for that one person without throwing out the policy wholesale. But if there's a large number of people saying this policy doesn't work for me, well, it doesn't work.
Okay, we're down to the last 10 minutes of our conversation here.
Leader, so I'll just take 1 minute more. Yeah. This same leader has skip level conversations once every 3 months with everyone on his team and mandates that every other leader in the organization do the same.
Does the same.
So he says, you know exactly what's happening in the organization. There's no room to hide. There's no room to hide. If my boss is treating me badly, if my boss is a so-and-so, pata chal jayega.
That's out there. No, that's true. I mean, roundtables, and Vivan, actually coming back to that point, right? I mean, I know the kind of organization you're running, but this is a great technique, doing roundtables once every 3 months with all the employees, bring them into a room and have an open conversation about whatever's on their minds is a great way to actually bond. And then pick up 1 or 2 action items from those roundtables and actually turn around and say, okay, you know what, guys, we're going to work on this. And then come back at the next roundtable and say, okay, see, we talked about these 2 things that we needed to do. And yeah, this is what we did in order to do that. One of the things that I see here is this virtuous cycle of communication that takes place between the leadership and the employees, and it's a continuous flow. It's not periodic, and it's not event-based. If there is a continuous cycle of communication taking place, then most organizations, I can tell you, work. It's a little hard to do initially, but trust me, as you start to get into that virtuous cycle, a value starts to develop, which is just huge. It's just huge. It's a massive accelerator. All right. So I want to switch now to one last piece now, okay? What the hell is going on in Russia and Ukraine, man?
I don't comment on politics. I don't like getting into politics, but I think it's very tragic. I think
it's tragic.
It's tragic. I think by all accounts, it's tragic, and I know people who are personally affected. I'm just hoping and praying that things sort themselves out very, very quickly. It's not good. Too many people have died already. Yeah. Too many people have died.
Makes you wonder, right? In the topic of toxic leadership, I think this has got to be way up there in terms of toxic leadership.
No, you bet. I mean, you bet. But I'm totally. But I'm very, very impressed by the Ukrainian.
Amazing. What spirit! Yeah. What spirit! Guys, I tell you, when we think about our world and our issues that we are dealing with at our workplace, in our lives, and so on, I swear this is one day today. I'm counting my blessings that I'm here in India. We're safe. All of us are okay. We're not at war. We're not having our children and our mothers and our fathers and sisters and brothers being blown up on the streets. I mean, let's count our blessings and let's send a prayer up for all those people in Ukraine and in Russia, as a matter of fact. they send their soldiers, and usually it's only the poorest of the poor who become soldiers and go out to die. Poor guys. I mean, what, you think they want this war? I doubt it. Anyway, so let's just send a prayer up to everybody, and that's it. So, Samir, anything you want to wrap up with?
Well, I mean, I'm still on this thought about war in Europe. I think the last time they had a war must have been the early 90s with the breakup of Yugoslavia. And
yeah, Yugoslavia, Serbia, and Kosovo. Yep.
It's sad. I think they prevented it from becoming becoming a continent-wide conflagration then. But I think the stakes are much higher now. So best to just keep fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. I guess. Yep.
Well, on the other hand, I think coming back to our themes of organization and culture and leadership, I think it's a very exciting time to be entering the workforce, or even be in the early stages of your career in the workforce, because I think there is so much opportunity. I mean, everything has changed. Most of the major assumptions have changed, and they haven't been replaced fully by new assumptions as yet. So quite genuinely, I think an inflection point, be it on leadership, be it on organization, be it on systems around performance management and training and recruitment and so on. There is really an opportunity to do things very, very differently now and actually create and shape the organization of future. So I think it's an extremely exciting time to be in the workforce now.
Super.
Very
I agree. Yeah. It's rare. It's probably once in a generation sort of thing that you actually get to write your own rules.
Yeah.
So to speak.
I guess the last time there was a major opportunity of this sort across the world would have been in the late 1940s or something like that.
Yeah, around the Second World War.
After WW. Yeah.
Well, Samir, thanks so much, my friend. If anybody doesn't have any last questions, going once, going twice. So, all right, Samir, thanks so much, buddy.
Thank you, Bharat. Great talking to you. Great talking to everyone on the chat. Thanks a lot.
Likewise, my friend.
Cheers.
Talk to you soon, okay? I'll call you.
Yeah. Cheers. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.